I assume that by now you have been asking yourselves the question of why a program concerned with an addition to this building would have something called the Dead House as part of the program, and I'll try to explain that. As many of you are aware, and as the Chancellor just mentioned, there once was a building just south of Farley Hall that was called a magnetic observatory, or what came to be called the Dead House. It once had a historical marker there, and when it was removed in 1958, the marker was sent to the Department of Archives and History in Jackson. They had the marker redone and recently sent it back to Ole Miss. I talked to the Chancellor about what we might do about the reinstallation of that marker, and he asked about what physics and astronomy might be doing for the sesquicentennial celebration and suggested wisely that we incorporate that here. Wisely in particular, since my idea of having a formal unveiling today was ruled out when he said it might be cold on December 11, so you can see why he's our Chancellor. As you're aware, the Barnard Observatory was built between 1857 and 1859. The Magnetic Observatory was probably built at about that same time. One historian has said it was built in 1860. As far as I have been able to tell, we do not know exactly what kinds of scientific instruments were used there or just how much research took place there. Drs. Kennan and Gladden have reported that one student's PhD work was on, quote, the determination of the latitude and magnetic elements of this station. The building has been of particular interest mostly for two reasons. One, because of its construction, and two, because of its history. It's being used as a morgue during the Civil War. There are all kinds of stories about the construction of the building. One newspaper article said it was built by a British Scientific Society. Reports, and there are many of them, just one of them is given in your program, vary considerably about the width of the exterior walls. Most accounts are that the nails were made of copper and that the hardware inside the building was copper also. I've also heard that the nails were made of wood. Some have written that the original building had no windows, and some have written that it had very small windows. Most do believe, however, that the original building had dirt floors, and all agree that it had unusually a brick roof. It was a fairly small building, but Mr. John White, when the building was removed, said that approximately 40,000 bricks had been used in the construction. As your program notes indicate, both Confederate and Federal soldiers were brought to the Dead House if they died on the campus, and they were taken to the Dead House, which was used as a morgue before they were eventually buried, many of them in the Confederate cemetery on the campus. The building was renovated considerably, probably about 1912, and beginning at that time it was used as a fraternity house, as a faculty residence, and as a building given to the School of Law where the people worked on the Law Journal. It was first proposed that the building be removed when Farley Hall was to be built in 1929, but somehow the building survived at that time, but it was disassembled in 1958 to make way for an annex to Farley Hall, and for a number of years it was hoped that it might be reassembled elsewhere, but unfortunately the materials have been damaged or misplaced or have deteriorated. At any rate, fairly soon the historical marker will be put back near the place where it was to begin with, and we hope that when you're in that vicinity you will stop by to see the historical marker, which can remind you of another important historical building in the history of the Physics and Astronomy Department.